Hello and welcome to the Tough Girl podcast, which is all about motivating and inspiring you. I'm your host, Sarah Williams. The Tough Girl podcast is sponsorship and ad-free thanks to the monthly financial support of patrons. To find out more about supporting the mission to increase the amount of female role models in the media, please do go and check out patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. There's over 200 patrons who are currently supporting the mission. Please do join and become one of them. Today, I'm delighted we're going to be speaking to Dr. Memnia Theodorou, the first and only Cypriot to have sailed from the UK to Australia as part of the Clipper Round the World yacht race. We talk about the why, the challenges she faced and overcame, what she learnt from it, and how her life has changed going forward.
Memnia Theodorou, Dr. Memnia Theodorou. I'm a dentist and I come from Cyprus originally. This is where I was born and bred. I studied dentistry in Greece, in Thessaloniki, and then I moved to the UK and I practiced there for about a decade roughly. I was in London and I was an associate in a clinic before I gave everything up and went sailing around the world.
Oh, I love it. It's such an amazing thing to go and do, to go and sail around the world. But I know there's a little bit of a backstory about how you came to do this, because when you were growing up, had you ever done any sailing? Were you outdoorsy?
Well, actually, in Cyprus, I don't think there is much of a culture of outdoors sports or sports in general. Even though we are surrounded by sea, there is not much sailing culture. There is some, but not competitive, for sure not. And not a lot of people are outdoorsy. So I was always active and athletic, let's say, but I wasn't that sort of person who did adventures and expeditions and all of that. So it was only because I moved to the UK and I kept bumping into this advertisement, let's say, of sailing around the world. So that's what prompted me to sign up to it, really. It wasn't because I was very much into sailing. I did do a short sailing diploma when I was in Greece as a student, but I wouldn't consider that much of experience in terms of knowing where I was going into.
Yeah, I mean, I remember sort of walking around London. I've seen like the Clipper yacht race adverts, and it just, I don't know, it just looks like the most phenomenal race ever and one incredible opportunity. But why did you decide to actually take the plunge? Like what convinced you that this is something that you needed to do?
Well, a lot of unfortunate events that happened in my life actually was what convinced me. I kept looking at this ad for 2 years and I kept looking at those, those faces where they have the before and after. And I remember looking at a girl and thinking, gosh, she must be so brave to sign up on this race. And at the back of my head, I always thought, maybe that would be a good idea if I did it at some point in my life, but it was never the right time. But I was going through the roughest patch of my life, I would say, at one stage a few years back when my sister was diagnosed with cancer, with ovarian cancer. And after a short fight, we lost her. And I was also in a dysfunctional relationship and the manager at work had changed and that was also not working for me. So I found myself in a very rough patch. And so this was for me an escape. A way to leave everything behind and to just go find myself, if we want to put it that way. But yes, unfortunately, it was a series of bad events that happened in my life that led me to sign up, and I don't regret it. It was the best decision I ever took.
I'm so sorry to hear about the loss of your sister and dealing with everything else that you dealt with, being in that challenging relationship, also struggling at work as well. Combining all three together, that must have been a really tough time in your life. How old were you when this was happening?
I think I was about 32 years old when it all started, roughly 32 years old. Now I'm 37.
You decided at 32, was that the year that you went and did the Clipper yacht race, or did it take you some time to actually commit and decide that this is what you wanted to go and do?
Yeah, I think I was 32 when I went. I mean, I was thinking about it the year before when I was 31. That's when everything happened in my life. So I think it took a little bit of thinking back and forth. Do I do this? Do I not? And then I reached such a low phase in my life that I thought, what the heck? What do I have to lose? I'm just going to send an application through. It doesn't mean that I'm going to do it. I'm just going to go there, check it out, listen to the director who was going to speak to us, figure this thing out, ask some questions and take it from there. But then when I went, I was intrigued. I was actually sold. I wanted to be on that boat.
So what was the next steps? I mean, did you leave your job, sell your house? How did you fund it? Because it's quite an expensive race.
It's very interesting you asked that. I was having a very tough time at work. As I said, I mean, work was not working out for me, but I had put my application through for a house deal for an apartment that I wanted to buy. So I couldn't actually leave work because I was tied to this mortgage application. And for whatever reason, if you believe in fate or that everything happens for a reason, this application was taking very long. I mean, the house deal was taking very long, the background checks. So meanwhile, I couldn't leave work. And even though I wanted to, so I made an arrangement with the manager that I would sign up for this sailing race and I will take a 3-month unpaid leave, to which they agreed, just so I don't have to leave work. So I can have the mortgage go through and I can get the house, and then I will sort it out when I would come back. But while I was waiting for this house deal, things at work and in my own personal life were getting worse and worse, to the point that I couldn't last there any longer. And after 5 months of waiting for this house deal, the seller changed his mind and he said he's not selling anymore. So after 5 months of waiting, the house deal fell through. So all of a sudden, I didn't need this mortgage application, not at that stage anymore. So nothing was holding me back at work. And I don't know if it was an impulsive decision, but then I decided that I couldn't get in the process again of looking for a new house, a new flat. I couldn't put myself through that. So I decided to use my deposit money to fund my training and the first leg of this adventure, which was to go from the UK to Rio de Janeiro.
Oh, fantastic. I think the best way to spend your money, forget the house deposit.
Yeah, threw my money in the sea, literally.
So you talked about, the training, paying for the training and doing the first leg. Talk to us more about what training was involved. Were you working like a gym program? Did you have a personal trainer? Were you figuring it out as you went? Were you having weekend courses? Was there study involved as well? Can you break that down for us?
Yes, actually, the Clip Around the World Yacht Race provides you with sailing training, and it's quite extensive. It's a 4-week training. This is nothing to do with your fitness levels or your mental, let's say, mindset. It's pure sailing training and getting to know the boat, how to handle it, how to sail the boat, and also how to live in the boat when it sails 24/7. Because when you're in a race in the middle of an ocean, there are no breaks. There is not a marina to pull over and chill for a bit. So it races 24/7 and you're in a sleep pattern of on and off the whole time. So it's a 4-week training course. But aside to that, I also increased my days at the gym. Yes, I did hire a personal trainer for a bit, but to be absolutely frank, when I went there, I thought, yeah, I'm quite fit. I'd always been athletic. So I felt that, yeah, of course I can do this. But I think I underestimated it, because the muscles that I needed were not enough. The muscles that I had were not enough for the muscles that I needed, but they developed over the actual sailing period, because you get to use the same muscles again and again when you're on the boat. So no matter how fit you think you are, when this is not your sport, you are going to have aches and pains, and it's going to take a little bit of time to get used to your body getting used to this new environment. So this was the training part, let's say, that happened alongside the sailing training. And sailing wise, we had 4 different weeks of training, and each week looked at different things on the boat and on the sleeping patterns and on the racing rules and regulations. So the first week is just I would say now, it's a very gentle introduction to sailing and what this is all about. I say it's gentle now, but that first week of training was horrifying to me. We were seasick the whole time. Every time the boat would take a little bit of a peculiar angle, I was panicking. I'd never found myself in such a large boat and in choppy waters. So it looks gentle now, but at that point it wasn't so gentle. And they give you the opportunity after that first week of training to pull out. If you think that this is not for you anymore, if it's not what you expected, or if you think you can't handle it, then you can pull out and you don't lose your money. But beyond that week, if you carry on, then you're committed and you are going to go on this race, and that's it.
Oh, that's fantastic. I didn't know about that, actually. So that's really interesting. So you had this first week, you're being seasick, you're meeting all these new people, you're thrown into this completely different world. How was it like, meeting the other people, being part of a team and going through that sort of that first week experience? And why did it cement that actually, yes, this is what I want to do? Was there anything that happened, or is there any moments that stand out for you?
Well, first of all, being part of a team was very refreshing to me. I'm a dentist, so being a dentist is a profession that isolates you a lot. You are in your room. You're hardly a part of a team, especially in the NHS that I used to work. If anything, there is quite a bit of competition between associate dentists in the same building. You're not connected in a common contract. Each one of you has their own contract to fulfill. So dentistry can be a very isolating profession on its own, and finding myself being part of a team was really rejuvenating, I can say, because if I didn't do something right, then the boat wouldn't move forward the way it should, and it was our collective effort that would help us win this race. So for me, this was really, really attractive at that stage in my life, where I was feeling isolated because of the grief that I was experiencing, because of the relationship that was falling apart, because of everything that was happening in my life. I felt quite alone. And to find myself within a team, it was very, what's the word for it in English? It was very refreshing and appealing. So that's why I really, really wanted to be part of a team. And I met quite a few interesting people and fascinating people. Most of them are achievers and dreamers and adventurers and doers and go-getters. So it was lovely to be part of this environment. And I met some lovely people, and I've created friendships and relationships that I know will last for a lifetime, because we've been through such an extreme situation, an extreme adventure. So it was brilliant.
Yeah. How long did you have from when you first signed up, started doing your training, before setting off to sail to Rio?
I think I signed up. I gave my application and I went for this first interview. I think it was December 2014. And I left end of August 2015. But my training happened mostly in the months of April, May, June, so leading up to the race. But I also met people who had preparing for this race for over 2 years because of work restrictions, of holiday restrictions, let's say. They had applied for the race 4 years ahead. And so they would take 2 weeks off each year to do the sailing training. So they would do it in increments. And there were other people who flew in from China. And for those people, they packed all their training in 1 month, just to work logistically, and then they headed off. So for every person, it was different, although I think having a bit more time to learn the tricks of the boat and let everything sink in, it's best.
Mm. Tell me more about your mindset and the mental preparation before you started on the boat. I mean, were they giving you advice about the mental side and how to train your mind or prepare yourself maybe for things like the sleep deprivation?
I wouldn't say they give you exactly a training, but they inform you of these things. My team, I was in the Great Britain and Northern Ireland boat, it was blessed to have a brilliant skipper. And I remember the first time we met him as a team, he said, we need to be tolerant. We're going to be confined in a very small space, restricted. There is no way out. If you fall out with each other, there is no escape. That's where you'll be for the next months. So we have to be tolerant towards one another and respect privacy and the private space of each person, and try to resolve our issues. So I think he set the tone that we shouldn't take everything personally. We should let things slide and understand where we are, and understand the greater good, the greater cause of what we were doing there, and not let our personal differences get in the way. So I think this was an important lesson in terms of mindset, to set us to the right path, not to have a lot of friction on the boat, let's say.
Yeah, because that's going to be tough when you're on your boat. You can't go anywhere. You're going to be there for a long time. There's a lot of people in a very, very confined space. So take us to the start line. Where did you start from? How did it feel, like getting onto the boat, knowing that you're going to be on it for the next month and sailing across the Atlantic Ocean and making your way across to Rio?
Well, we left London end of August, and then we headed towards the east of England, let's say, where it was our starting point. But leaving London was the moment that I remember, because it was a big hype. There were drummers up on the masts, there was music, there was live coverage. It was a big event. There were a lot of people there. It just felt like it was a real thing. This is it now. I remember the boat moving away from the marina there in London, in St. Catherine's Docks. And I was looking at the dogs moving away from me, and I was telling myself, well, this is it now. This is it now. If you don't jump off the boat and swim to the shore, that's it. You're stuck here for a month. Are you going to jump? No, I can't jump now. I was having this mental dialogue inside my head, looking at the people moving away from me. But I knew that once that happened, that's it. I'm committed to the boat. This is my house now. This is my home. This is where I'll be. And it was a fantastic journey down the Thames until the starting point. And then we crossed the Channel. That was very interesting, because there's a lot of traffic there. And if you're not careful or vigilant, accidents can happen. And it's one of the most notorious bits of sea there. Is quite choppy, and we all suffer from seasickness at one point or the other. And then we were in the Atlantic, and that's a different story. But once we exited the Channel and we were in the big ocean, it was a totally different scenery, because it was much smoother. It was much nicer ride, let's say. And it was the easiest bit from the race that I took part in, I have to say. So crossing the Atlantic compared to crossing the Southern Atlantic or the Indian Ocean or the Southern Ocean that we found ourselves in later, that bit was the easier bit. So it gave us, again, a bit of time to get used to the boat, to learn how to helm the boat, how to drive the boat. We had a lot of coaching from our skipper. We learned to read the weather, the clouds. It was all a process. So the first month that I was on the boat, I was constantly learning about the boat, about sailing, about my teammates. It was as if we were all falling in love with each other and falling in love with this sport. It was lovely.
What was life like on the boat? What was your daily routine? What was your role?
So we shared a lot of roles, especially on the first leg, especially crossing the Atlantic for the first time, because I did carry on for 4 months. But that first leg, we all tried everything, every role, from helming the boat, which is driving, changing the sails, pulling ropes in the lines in the cockpit. We tried everything that we could. But as time went by, we naturally fell into different positions, the ones that we found to be easier for us. For instance, I found that I liked to drive the boat, to helm the boat. I loved that, and I was quite good at it. And I tried to be at the bow, at the front of the boat, where we changed the sails. And during the first leg, it wasn't so bad because the weather had been favorable. But later on, I realized that I wasn't as strong as required to be there when it was stormy and windy. My muscles were just not enough. So I retracted and I stayed behind the mast, so in the cockpit and in the helm. So we tried various roles, and then we naturally fell into the positions that we found more comfortable to be in. But our daily routine, because you asked, it would be to wake up at a certain point in the day, depending on where we're on Earth. So we would wake up, and then during the daytime, we would have normally 6 hours shift watch. So it would be 6 hours on deck, doing whatever it needed for the boat to move forward. And then we would move to 6 hours off time. So that would be the time for us to eat, have a quote unquote shower. There were no showers, just like a wet wipe tissue, wiping ourselves down, but not really shower. And rest, write our blogs or our journals, spend time with each other and sleep, because we were very sleep deprived. Normally, after we ate, we all just dashed for our sleeping bags. We didn't hang around very long. And then after those 6 hours, then we entered the night watch, and that would be 4 hours on and then 4 hours watch. And it was one of the most excruciating things is to wake up at 2 a.m. in stormy weather to go up on deck to do your 4-hour watch there. It's freezing and it's really, really unpleasant. And we got used to the pattern, though. It was hard at first. During the first crossing, it was really, really difficult for me to wake up. I'm not really a morning person. I do like to sleep in. So it was very hard for me to wake up every 4 to 5 hours. But by the end of it, I got into a rhythm and it wasn't an issue anymore.
So you said, you'd be woken up at 2 a.m., you're going out to deck for this 4-hour shift. How do you occupy yourself? Are you allowed to listen to music or audiobooks or podcasts while you're on deck? Or is it there's nothing in your ears and it's just full on 100% concentration?
It's very funny you asked that, because even if you wanted to do all these things, it was impossible because everything was wet. Apart from if we exclude the middle part of the Atlantic where it's tropical, all the rest of my race was in much colder situations, much bigger waves and sea. So waves were splashing over the deck constantly, and you would always be wet. It wasn't possible to have any electronic devices if they weren't in waterproof cases. And even that didn't work most of the times. If you had your phone exposed, even down below where it's not wet per se, but you have condensation and the salt of the sea, our phones stopped charging in the end. They got destroyed in the end. So any electronic devices really did not work on deck, on below deck, not properly anyway. And you wouldn't want to have books or anything like that. We did try to have a speakerphone at some point, but again, it was labeled waterproof, but much like our clothing, nothing stays waterproof in the conditions that we were in. So even having music was really not an option unless the sea was really, really calm. So yes, there was concentration, but we found, and nobody talks about this in the race because it's advertised as an adventure, as an extreme sport, and it is. But when you are in the flow, let's say, you have some person on the helm driving the boat, then you have a couple of people keeping an eye on the lines and the sails, and then the rest are redundant. They're just there in case they're needed, or in case, when their turn comes to go on the helm and drive the boat. So a lot of the times we found ourselves just staring at the sea, getting wet, feeling chilly and cold. And when we reached at the bottom of the Southern Ocean, it was so cold that we had to divide our watch, and we would say, right, half of you go for half an hour downstairs, down below, to have a tea or coffee or whatever, and then we'll swap for the other half to go. And that's how it went, because it was really, really chilly, but we all had to be ready to go in case something happens. Because if something happens in those situations, it's not a matter of let's just slowly get ready and go. It's a matter of life and death situation. And so you have to be absolutely ready to go in the next second. So we all had to be ready, even if we weren't needed for something.
So you probably ended up having a lot of time alone with your own thoughts, really. How did you find that?
Well, a lot of people mentioned that it was, that it was like a treat, because in our busy everyday lives, and a lot of people come from London, and in London the pace is quite fast, and you don't very often enjoy this alone time with yourself. Well, you weren't alone. You were surrounded by people, so you didn't feel alone, but you were alone in your head, because conversation also did not happen when you are in storms or very windy situations. You can't possibly converse with someone. So you were sitting looking at the sea with your own thoughts, and a lot of self-discovery, I think, happens in those moments, and a lot of thinking about life and how things are in your life, how things in this little boat is like being part of this boat is like being part of the wider world, and you put the dots together, and I don't know, you rediscover yourself, I think.
Yeah. So just explain a little bit more about your routes. The first leg was going from London, so leaving London, heading up the East Coast, crossing the Channel, heading over to Rio. Just talk us through, did you have a break in Rio before you set off again on leg 2? How many legs were there, and what was your route?
I took part in 4 legs. There are 8 in total, but I only did half the world. And so when we reached Rio, it's actually a funny story, because I only intended to go up to Rio, and then I intended to stay there and have some holidays in Rio and then go back to London. But because I had quit my job, eventually was not needed when the mortgage deal fell through, I had quit. So nothing was holding me back, and I was enjoying myself so much. So I decided to use a little bit more of my savings and then carry on. And so while I was in Rio, I said to them that I'm interested in continuing this. So I signed up for the second leg, and then the second leg left from Rio de Janeiro and headed towards Cape Town. And when I was in Cape Town, I was like, okay, I've spent enough money of my own. I can't possibly fund the next leg, but wouldn't it be great if I did the Southern Ocean, the mighty Southern Ocean? Everyone talks about this part of the leg where you find yourself in the hugest waves that you will ever see on this planet, being so close to Antarctica. It would have been a natural progression for me, starting from a tropical climate, heading up to the South Atlantic, which was quite tough, and then going into the toughest bit, which was Southern Ocean, and reach Australia. And it would have made full circle, me starting from the UK to Australia. It was a nice bit of sailing to do, but I couldn't possibly fund this for myself at that stage. So I asked my father. Well, actually, he suggested, he says, well, I'm going to give this to you. You're enjoying this so much. They were worried in Cyprus, of course, about me and my well-being, but my father could see that I was enjoying this so much. So then he funded my third leg, and I paid him back. I have to say this. I did pay him back. So he funded the third leg, which was from Cape Town to Albany, Australia. And when I reached there, news reached my country that I was the first Cypriot to have sailed from the UK to Australia. So my story kind of went viral in Cyprus, and not only in Cyprus, also to Greek and Cypriot expats in other countries of the world. So my story kind of became viral, and I gained some publicity. So then I was lucky enough to find a sponsor who sponsored my fourth leg, which was going around Australia, first to Sydney, having a brief stop to Sydney. That's the fourth leg divides in 3 races. So the first bit was from Albany to Sydney, short stopover for Christmas. And then we took part in the iconic Sydney to Hobart race, which was amazing. Another brief stop. And then the last section was from Hobart to Airlie Beach, and that's where I finished my race. The boats carried on for another 4 legs until they did the whole circumnavigation, but that was my final point, Airlie Beach.
Oh, congratulations. Absolutely incredible. Because I know you think, being the first Cypriot, absolutely awesome. What an incredible experience to go through. But reflecting back now on that journey, those 18,000 nautical miles traveling from Rio to Cape Town, across the South Atlantic to Australia, what do you think the biggest learning experience was for you?
Well, if I had to pick one, only one, because I learned a lot of things, but if I had to pick one, I would say that we are all capable of a lot more things that we give ourselves credit for. I never thought that I will be the first Cypriot doing anything. I never even thought I would find myself in the Southern Ocean. It was only by the natural progression of things that happened. But when I completed this, when I had crossed the Southern Ocean and I found myself on the other end in Albany, I just looked back and I was like, gosh, I can't believe that I came to this point in Albany, and I'm unscathed. I have my arms and my legs, and I'm alive. It could have gone so much wrong, this whole journey. And so it gave me an immense sense of self-reliance and self-belief that we can actually achieve a lot more than we think.
What are some of the memories, like the memories that stand out for you, you know, the positive or the not so positive? Could you share maybe just a few of those moments?
Well, one of the memories that stands out to me is that when we were in the Southern Ocean and we've been through a spell where the sky is so gray, literally, that you cannot distinct if it's day or night. I'm absolutely honest here, because you wake up and sleep every 3 to 4 hours. So sometimes your biological clock gets confused and you wake up at 12, let's say, to go to your watch on deck, and you don't know if it's noon or if it's midnight. It happened. So we were going through this stormy patch for days on end, and at some point albatrosses started following us. At first it was just one, and it was just hovering over our stern at the back of the boat, and I presume the albatross was just waiting for some fish from our wakes, but nonetheless it stayed there and it hovered for a bit. And then in the next watch there was a second albatross, and then in the next watch there was a third and fourth and fifth, and we had 5 albatrosses following us for days on end. And it put such a grin on our faces when you step up on deck and it's just miserable and cold and stormy and windy, and you looked up and these birds were like our pets. They just kept us company. So inevitably you would smile. So that's one of the fondest memories that I'll have from this trip, having those birds following us. And they're such a rare sight. You can only see them in the Southern Ocean or in the North Pacific. So it's not like, it's a very unique experience to have these birds alongside you. So that's one thing that I remember a lot. Another thing I remember a lot is one day I was stepping on deck, and again, it was after a series of days of horrible and miserable weather, and we were really, really cold, and I stepped up on deck, and I had left my watch being in a storm, and when I next stepped up on deck, it was daylight, and there was this huge rainbow, such a bright rainbow, and the sea had somewhat calmed. It wasn't calm, but it was better than before, and you could see faintly a double rainbow, and you could see the whole rainbow because there is nothing in the horizon. It's just you and the sea, so you can see the whole of the rainbows. And the froth of the waves was like a lace covering the sea. And I just have this image in my head, and I wish I could draw better to draw this image, but it was one of the things that I will remember, cherish forever.
Oh, how long in total were you out on the water for? How many months did this take?
I think it was about 5 months in total. It takes 11 months to complete the whole circumnavigation, and I think I was just over 5 months.
So 5 months of your life at 32 years old, you finish in Australia you've done 4 legs of this incredible race, and you're finally stepping off the boat in Australia, and you finished this part of the journey. What was that like for you coming to the end? And did you know what you wanted to do next? Did you have a plan?
Well, I've always been this very highly organized, even obsessive sort of person that wants to have a plan and wants to know where things are going. And, we're doing one thing after the other. And I've always been this person. But because I had lived through such difficult times, and the way I saw this is like every plan that I had in my life had failed. For instance, I had planned for my children when I would have children, and when my sister would have children, they would play and they would get along, and that plan disappeared. I planned that I would get a house, and that plan disappeared. I planned that I would be getting married or whatever, but my relationship was gone as well. So because that last year was such a horrible year for me, and everything that I had planned failed, when I signed up on this race, I said, you know what, if everything that I've planned has failed, I'm joining this race taking a leap of faith. I don't have any plans. I'll see where it takes me. So that's why I kept signing up on legs. I had never planned it. I only planned to go up to Rio. This was the original idea. But I said, you know what? I'm just going to let life take me where she wants. and so I didn't have any plans. And when I finished in Australia, for a bit, I thought that perhaps I could go a little bit of traveling or meet some friends, but I was running really, really low on money. That's one thing. But then the other thing is that my body was absolutely exhausted and shattered. I found myself lying on the beach for a few days just to recover. I was exhausted at a level that I can't possibly describe, from all the sleep deprivation for months on end and all the high adrenaline and high stress situations. So I didn't actually have plans. I wanted to meet a friend for a short trip, and that never happened just because I was so tired. And I came back to Cyprus, to my parents' house. The only thing that I knew for sure is that I did not want to go back to a 9-to-5. After you've lived something as big as this, something life-changing like this, you can't possibly be the same when you go back. So I just knew that I didn't want to go back to finding an associate position as a dentist and grind my way through until I retire. So, I haven't joined a 9-to-5 work. So, yeah.
What have you been doing?
So I decided to, instead of join a dental practice and signing up on a contract, this is how things work in NHS dentistry, I decided that I will be just covering positions, emergency positions, let's say. So doing locuming work, if you know that term. Mm-hmm. So I decided to be a locum. So I will take on positions when people went on maternity leave, or when somebody got ill, or if they couldn't fill a position. So I had full control of my schedule. I knew when I'll be working and for how long and where. And, well, I decided that I will be working much less. I made an agreement with myself that I will be earning less money, but I will have much more time to enjoy the things that I wanted to do, to spend time with the people that I loved, and I didn't want to have to ask anybody for holidays anymore.
Oh, do you know what? That is so powerful. So, I mean, because actually sometimes you've got to decide, what is it that makes you happy? How do you want to spend your time? And sometimes there are going to be compromises, whether it's, you know what, I am going to be earning less money. And I've been there as well. But actually, when you compare it to your happiness and your soul, it's powerful stuff. So you've also gone and done a TED Talk as well, Tedx Talk. How did that go? What was that like?
Oh my God, that was another huge experience for me. After my news went viral about me being the first Cypriot to have completed this from the UK to Australia, I was invited to be a TEDx speaker on the upcoming TEDx event. Now, I have to say that I had never at that point been in front of an audience before, ever. Maybe when I was 10 years old at a school play, that sort of thing, but not even during university years, because of the nature of my profession, we had to do a lot of work with our hands and present work that we did with our hands. We didn't have a lot of PowerPoint presentations. Actually, I did none while I was at university. So I had never stood in front of an audience. So it was nerve-wracking for me. It took me 2 months to reply to the guy, to the curator. It took me 2 months to say yes. I was so scared. And the opening line of my TEDx talk is that I was more scared of doing this than actually sailing through the Southern Ocean. And it was absolutely true. It was a nerve-wracking experience. It was totally worth it. But yes, I prepared a lot for it exactly because I was so nervous.
Because that's obviously facing a fear, and you face quite a few fears, facing your fear of public speaking, taking on this sailing challenge, doing something for the first time, having the courage to go after what you've always wanted. What advice and tips would you have for other women who want to have the courage to face their own fears?
One thing that I realized is that fear will always be there. If you're waiting for a moment that you're going to be prepared enough, or you have enough knowledge, enough resources, enough money, whatever, to not feel this fear, it will never happen. You will always have this fear. And this is what I realized, that fear is not there to stop us from doing things. Just accept it. Accept that you will feel fear, you will be nervous, but just do it anyway. And also the other thing that I would say is take it a step at a time. I mean, I don't advocate just jumping into the Southern Ocean, let's say. I don't think I could have done that. I think the only reason that I was able to do it is because I took it step by step. I first learned sailing, and I first did training, and then I did the Atlantic, and then I did the South Atlantic, which was harder. And then, so when the time came for me to do this huge step to go into the Southern Ocean, it was only one step further. So a lot of times I think people paralyze when they're thinking of their big goals or their big ideas. It just looks so far ahead that fear takes over and it just seems unattainable. Whereas what I've learned is just, okay, your dream might be 10 steps ahead, but what is the one next step that you could take to take you towards that dream? You don't have to think of the 10 steps at once. Just think of one step.
Absolutely, break it down, because that's actually what you did in essence, because you just filled in the application form, didn't know necessarily where it was going to go, and you sent it off, and then it's like, oh, we'll just try the first week, see how that goes, because there's still that get out clause. And actually you took it step by step and, you know, ended up becoming the first Cypriot to do this, which is absolutely incredible. What's next for you? Have you got anything on the bucket list or any other adventure challenges that you want to go after?
Well, at the moment, I've just returned from an all-female expedition up in Zanskar Valley, trekking the Zanskar frozen river in the Himalayas, and it was with Felicity Aston, which I'm sure you know, and she's been on the podcast. So at the moment, I still need to get some rest from that adventure. I don't like to be always on the go. I like to do it in increments because I do other things as well. I still do dentistry. I still do public speaking. So yes, it's not at the moment there isn't an adventure on side, but yeah, I've just returned from one.
So Felicity, obviously an absolute legend. Tell us a little bit more about that adventure and that trip. What was involved there?
Well, I had been yearning for an adventure last year, a few months ago, maybe 8 months ago. And this comes again and ties in with what you said about courage. I knew of Felicity. I didn't know her because I had heard of her stories and her adventures. And she had a Cypriot woman on one of her expeditions, I think the Euro-Asian expedition. So that story also reached Cyprus, and I read about it. And I said, you know what, I don't know this woman, Felicity, but I'm going to take a step and just send her a message and say, look, this is who I am. I'm looking for an adventure. If you have anything in your mind, please keep me in mind. And it did take some guts to do that because I didn't know Felicity and I didn't know how she would react. I mean, she's an absolute legend, as you said, and she's very authentic and down to earth, but I didn't know that because I didn't know her at that point. And so I was like, well, I have to do this because I like what she does. And if she has something in mind, then why not be part of it? And at first she didn't reply to me. But then after a little bit of time, she said, I'm planning this expedition, all-female expedition up in the Zanskar frozen river. And it's one of the women dropped out because of, I think, illness or some other reason. And there is one spot. Would you like to join? And I said, of course, yes. And so I signed up. And again, for me, it was completely outside my comfort zone. I had done trekking before. I had crossed the whole of Costa Rica before from one end to the other, but it was in a tropical zone. So minus 30 degrees centigrade is not a natural environment for me. I come from Cyprus. It's normally over 40 degrees centigrade. So it was outside my comfort zone, but I said, why not? If it's not a challenge, then what is your tagline? If it's not challenging,
it doesn't challenge you. It doesn't change you.
It doesn't change you, exactly. And I said to her, I want to push myself and see, test my limits. I want to do that. So I said yes, and I had a lot of trepidation, and I did do my preparation, and I asked around about equipment and gear, and it was a completely alien environment for me. First of all, the temperature. I mean, people like Felicity and some other women that were on the expedition had spent quite a bit of time in cold temperatures. For me, it was the first time. And apart from the cold, it was also the fact that we were walking on ice, which is unlike any other sort of trekking you would do. It's very slippery. Your body is jolting the whole time, trying to keep balance. We had falls. We were sleeping in tents, so there was not that recovery time afterwards. So it was definitely challenging. But again, these experiences are so unique that your mind is full of images of the landscape that you saw that is just so rare. And it's so rewarding to know that you've been able to do this.
Good for you. Do you know what I like about that is the fact that you were so proactive and actually you reached out and were like, hey, this is me, if you've got any opportunities. And sometimes you don't know if you're going to get a response. And for those who don't know, Felicity Aston, she's a British polar explorer. She's got an MBE, author, speaker, expedition leader. She used to work in the Antarctic as a scientist. And in 2012, she became the first woman to ski alone across Antarctica, which gave her a place in the Guinness World Records. And she's gone on to do numerous other expeditions, you know, like the one that you mentioned before, the Euro-Arabian expedition as well. So, I mean, fantastic. What do you think the biggest learning curve or the learning was from going on that experience?
In Zanskar, I think I learned a lot about leadership because, yes, during my sailing trip, I had a great leader. Our skipper, he was a great leader, but it was so awesome to watch a woman being a leader and lead other women. So I think I learned a lot about from Felicity about the way she dealt with the issues that we faced because we had members of the expedition that were unwell, the way she handled some more difficult members of the team, her kindness, but also being firm on her decision and her assertiveness. And so I think I learned a lot about leadership from her. And obviously, that's not the only thing that I learned, but that stood out to me. And again, is to be proactive and look out for these things and reach out and don't be afraid to ask. Because what I always say is that if you never ask, the answer is always no. So,
Memnia, where's the best place for people to find more information out about you and to follow along with your journey and to connect with you?
So I'm quite active on social media. So I have a Facebook page, is Memnia Theodorou, motivational speaker, dentist, adventurer. And I have a website as well, which is www.memniatheodorou.com. I also have Instagram and LinkedIn under the same name, so I'm easy to find.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I put all the links to your Facebook, your social media, and to your website at the show notes, which will be available at toughgirlchallenges.com. But Memnia, thank you so much for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more about your story, the challenges that you faced and overcome, and what you've learned along the way. Absolute inspiration for other women out there to give them the courage to go after the life that they've always wanted. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invitation, Sarah. Thank you.
Hello, tribe. I hope you enjoyed that episode and it's made you think a little bit about what's the big challenge that you want to undertake? What is the big dream? And how are you going to make that dream a reality? Maybe just sit down for 5 to 10 minutes and really think about what is the vision for your life. Just write down anything and everything that inspires you and motivates you. And you think, do you know what? One day I want to go and do that. And it could be anything you want it to be, no matter how crazy you think it is at this moment in time, because I think listening to this episode is proof that you can have big dreams. Now, a couple of people were mentioning this episode, so I just want to give you a little heads up about other episodes you can go and listen to in the Tough Girl podcast. So we talked about Felicity Aston. So she's got an MBE, she's an author, a speaker, expedition leader, and former Antarctic scientist. In 2012, she was the first woman to ski alone across Antarctica. This was a journey of 1,744 kilometers that took 59 days to complete, and it gave her a place in the book of Guinness World Records. So when we first spoke with Felicity, which was in December 2015, she shares more about her early life, how she first got into polar exploration, what it was like being 19 and heading off into the unknown for the first time, also moving to the Antarctic and staying there for 2.5 years and actually living through 2 of the winters. She talks about developing skills, developing her mindset, mental hygiene, as well as the preparation for being alone. There's a lot of information in that episode, especially with regards to the start start of her career and how she did this challenge, being the first woman to ski alone across Antarctica. We then actually caught up with Felicity in June 2018 when she was behind the Women's Euro-Arabian North Pole expedition. And this expedition was basically an international team of women from across Europe and the Middle East who set out to ski the last degree to the North Pole. During the expedition, there was many physical challenge with temperatures down to minus 40 degrees, which sounds horrendous, dealing with polar bears, shifting pack ice. But basically, the core purpose of that expedition was to foster greater dialogue and understanding between women from Western and Arabian cultures. So, plus as well, being to inspire all women to reach beyond the expectations of others and to fulfill their own ultimate life ambitions. So that's a really, really fascinating episode. Felicity is a phenomenal speaker, so well worth listening to those 2 episodes. Now, if you were particularly taken by the Clipper yacht race and start thinking, do you know what, I'd love to take on an adventure like that, we actually spoke to Della Parsons in December 2017, who also quit her job to sail around the world with the Clipper yacht race. And during this podcast, Della goes into more detail, especially around the financing and the money and why she decided to take this career break and how she did it, what it was like being out there, what did she learn from it, the days that stand out, the good, the bad, and how she ended up actually working for the Clipper Yacht Race. By the way, this is not sponsored by them. I wish it was. That would be really cool. But the podcast is sponsorship and ad-free thanks to the support of the patrons. So there's 209 individuals behind the Tough Girl podcast. So 209 individuals who donate between $2 and $25 every single month. It makes a massive difference having a regular source of income coming in. I could do so much more in this space if I had more income coming in. It makes such a massive difference. So please do think about, actually, let me ask you this question. Has the Tough Girl podcast inspired you? Have you been motivated to do something different in your life? Has it made you smile? Has it made you laugh out loud? Has it made you cry in a positive, good way, as in like a release? Has it encouraged you to sign up for a race or to do a challenge, to step outside your comfort zone? If those answers are yes, and it has had a direct impact on your life, and you know that where you are now is because of the result of a change that you made because of listening to the Tough Girl podcast, think about what that could do for other women if they got to hear about the Tough Girl podcast. And I am a one-woman show. I do all the promotion, everything myself via social media. But if I did have more income coming in, I could make such a bigger difference in this space. So think about paying it forward. $2 a month, do it for a year, sign up for a couple of months, $5 a month. It makes a massive difference. Give back, allow other women to enjoy and embrace the opportunities that you've had from listening to the Tough Girl podcast. So please do go check out Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. Sign up, take action now, and help me to increase the amount of female role models in the media. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Tough Girl Podcast comes out every Tuesday at 7 a.m. UK time. Have an awesome day wherever you are, whatever you're doing. Give it your all. Go for it. Take that extra step. Give it that extra 2%, extra 10%, extra 100%. Give it your all. Do what you can. Work with what you've got now, and just be the best that you can possibly be. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. All right, take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.